Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Speakers don't generally just leave their job.
Right. The Speaker of the House is one of the most powerful political elected positions in the world. Members of Congress work their whole lives to be Speaker, and then they never leave. I mean, think of speakers who leave. Tom Foley lost his seat for re-election in 2004. That's why he had to leave. You know, Newt Gingrich faced major setbacks in the late 90s. He had to step down. Here you have Boehner and Ryan leaving basically because the institution has become dysfunctional. It is very hard to lead the Republican House Conference. They have Republicans have a 23-seat majority right now. The Freedom Caucus is 30 seats. So, I mean, you just do the math. It's just, it's very hard to get much done. And if you look at the average midterm loss of the party in the White House, about 28, 30 seats. So just, it's going to be very hard to have any kind of congressional, governing majority going forward. I think that's one reason Ryan is stepping back. It's not.
Do you think the internal polls, because you see them, are they showing that the Republican Party faces a big problem? Because in the polls we see, the gap has narrowed. The Democrats are not doing as well as they were.
So the generic ballot has come down. It's now Democrats up 4, which is down from where it was. And everyone talks about these retirements. We got 42 Republican incumbents retiring, but most of those are safe Republican seats. So Democrats are unlikely to win most of those seats. I just think what is not quantifiable at this point is the energy on the other side. The only data we have on that are the special elections we've seen so far. And every one of those special elections, the Democrats are turning out in almost presidential year levels, massive, and the Republicans are not. The Republicans don't seem to have that much to be excited about, and the Democrats are amped up. So I think the generic ballot data, the number is important, but I think you've got to look at the enthusiasm on the other side. And I worry that that's like a freight train.
I want to ask you about the sort of issue of why Trump's ratings are so high among Republicans. And I think you experienced that at CPAC, where you gave a speech, and you didn't get into the ideological heresies of Donald Trump compared to... You just talked about character, and you said, how can we celebrate a man who has these many strikes against him in terms of his character? And you got booed. Do you think that... What did that tell you about the Republican Party?
Well, it was that, and there was one other aspect, which was this invitation to Marine Le Pen, who represents the National Front and was an honored guest of a major conservative organization.
And the National Front has a history of anti-Semitism and racism.
Which she has not separated herself from, this Marine Le Pen. All right, so what it says is that the party is it's in danger of becoming a cult, a personality cult for Donald Trump. The conference, a 3-day CPAC conference, was established to be a cheerleading session for him. There are very few people who are skeptics who were invited, and so that's the danger. But as we just heard, that is a part of the Republican coalition, but it is also true that suburban college-educated voters are very dismayed, disheartened. They're not showing up, especially women. And so there are many parts of the party, there are many moving parts, and we don't yet know how it will all shake out. And I don't believe that the time has come to give up on the Republican Party entirely and to say it's a lost cause, it's become a Trump cult. I think there are still many, many Republicans who are very, who do not like Trump, preferred him to Hillary, but would love to see a challenger in 2020.
I think what Trump has introduced, and I think he's a symptom of it, I don't think he's the catalyst of it, is a level of hyper-populism and nativism on the right, that where you have conferences like it, they think it's okay that Marine Le Pen comes speak, that I think many of us didn't anticipate. And so I think there's a couple things going on. I think traditional Republican ideas still have support among the base of the party. I think we are going to face an entitlement crisis in 10 or 20 years. And I think conservatives will be, even at the grassroots, will be supportive of doing something significant. Some of the ideas that Paul Ryan had advocated. But again, what I didn't foresee was the sort of the social, cultural nastiness.
But you
toxicity.
don't see the Trump takeover of the Republican Party as complete.
No, because historically the party is defined basically by who the most senior elected official is of that party. And right now that person is Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump goes, someone will succeed him. It could be Tom Cotton. It could be Ben Sass. It could be there are a bunch of interesting, actually, young military vets who are running as Republicans in this cycle. Smart, impressive, energetic people. They sound a lot more like Paul Ryan on many issues, albeit not all, but on many issues, than they do like Donald Trump. One of those people will succeed. Mike Pence, his own vice president. Nikki Haley, look at these, Mike Pompeo, look at the people who you would see as the bench of the Republican Party. They sound much more like the pre-Trump party than the current Trump party.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of April of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A little bit of paprika is the secret. Yes, it is. All right. Well, Baghdad Bob Dan Senor. Yep, hardly anybody remembers him. Do you know he is actually Mr. Dana Perino? Yeah. And hardly anybody remembers her unless you watch Fox News. And hardly anybody there knows that Dan Senor and Dana Perino are married. I would think. Arizona has their special election today. And Perenini, I believe is her name, seems to be doing quite well. Though, get this. Now, Arizona has one of those non-voter ID schemes. And the printing company that the state hired to print up the voter ID cards, because when someone registers, then they get a voter ID card mailed to them. Over 160,000 people have not got their voter ID cards, ostensibly because of a disagreement with the printing company. We'll send the marshals over there and pick up that work and get it to a printing company that can get it printed out. Too late now, though. Today's election day. So convenient, isn't it? These people will stoop to no end to hold on to their power. They don't care about government or governing. Apparently, they do care about the largesse that they can acquire by becoming an elected official, which is not really the way a a representative democratic republic should function. But that's just me because I am a romantic. Yep. Okay, so, Ronnie Jackson. They're not going to... Poor Ronnie Jackson. Drinking on the job. The doctor, Ronnie Jackson, was drinking on the job. I don't know. Someone would be shocked by that. Oh, I'll just mention this real quick. Nazis had gathered in a town about 40 to 50 miles from Newnan, Georgia. Another small town, by the way. And some people are saying, Newnan's not a small town, more like a suburb. Yeah, well, something. It was less than 100,000 people as a small town by my standards. Excuse me. And I live in a town of only 2,200 people now. So, I live in a village. I'm smaller than a small town. So people are, I just love when you bring up these things that maybe, touch a nerve, the extent in which they're going to parse it down. Oh, this isn't really a small town. Oh yeah, really? You got one water tower in town. You're a small town. Jesus. But, neo-Nazis or Nazis outright gathered in this town about 50 miles or so from Newnan, Georgia, and had a giant swastika, and they burned it like they would burn the KKK cross, and it was a big festival, and everybody had their arms in a stiff-arm salute. And I don't know, something clicked into my brain, and I tweeted out that picture and said, "You must respect small-town America." Because I'm getting hit like we don't respect small-town America and its values. We have to respect small-town America and its culture. We have to respect gun culture. It's this demand all the time. And I'm going to go, okay. We must respect small-town America. And, of course, I'm not saying that every small town and everybody in every small town is a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer. But I know in my own small town, try going to City Hall and just asking the question, not demanding that it stop, but asking the question, if the Dixie swastika is again going to be flown in the town's major parade that they have every year that draws thousands from around the state and other states in the nation as well. Is that Dixie swastika going to be flown in the parade again? Now, maybe going to a city council in Southern Oregon and asking that question, referring to the rebel flag as the Dixie swastika might be, I don't know, a tad histrionic, maybe. But just ask that question. Don't even demand that it stop. And tell me that small-town America doesn't give succor to these racist, bigot secessionists. And I'm not saying every small town and every person in every small town does. But the people who always say, you'll say something and it's like, oh, you're saying that everybody's a Nazi. No, I'm not. The people who say that are usually the ones who, are Nazis. Okay, let's take a look. I've just been going on. I better get into what we're going to attend to today. Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a black woman who was denied a job because of her dreadlocks is taking her case to the Supreme Court. The Colorado GOP threatens to throw teachers in jail for going on strike, and the scope of the Koch brothers' influence on Trump climate policy comes under scrutiny. After the break, we'll move to the chef's table where Trump's con of voters will implode like his casinos. But now, there are global consequences. And imagine for a moment if Trump targeted a faith closer to the conservative Supreme Court's hearts and banned Catholics instead of Muslims. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. You go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You'll notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, monitors that throughout the day. To the leftish of the chat room link there at the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com are the contribute donate buttons. I mentioned a bit before that we're in the process of migrating and attempting to migrate. And that is still in stasis. So when I find out how that's going to work, I'll let you know. I'm hoping that everybody's contributions can just migrate over into our newer account. Otherwise, I guess I have to put out a plea to start over again. Oh, darn. But we pay our bills with contributions that you contribute. And thank you so much for that. We're unable to do it without you. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. And Tom takes care of that, though he's a busy person, but he does take care of that. So follow us there. And you can follow us on Twitter. We're there. If you want to go there, I'm not, suggesting it, but if you like it there, we're there too. And let's see, you can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And also make sure you check out the show notes and links diary that I post about 10 minutes before showtime. And that's on Daily Kos, of course. And I'm on Daily Kos as Justice Putnam. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, and other podcast platforms, etc., etc., etc. Did I say YouTube? We're on YouTube. Oh, maybe I guess I'm at that point now where I probably should mention, rate, review us, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on whatever podcast platform you're on. If you're on Spreaker, do say something or rate it some way. iTunes, yeah, please. And of course, what that does kind of pushes, hopefully pushes West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up the list a bit, because no one in their right mind would name a show with a letter from the end towards the end of the alphabet. No one in their right mind. That's why I'm a leftist. Okay. Let's get on with these stories that we've curated for you today. And so, here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. All right. After being denied a job because of her hair, and this is by Dominique Jackson from Raw Story, by the way, a woman is taking her case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filed a lawsuit on behalf of Chastity Jones in 2013, claiming that a company in Mobile, Alabama, racially discriminated against her because of her dreadlocks. Jones was offered a position at Catastrophe Management Solutions, or is that Catastrophe? An insurance claims company. However, the company revoked the job offer once Jones refused to change her hairstyle. Yes, that little bob is not allowed here in this office, we determine. Well, that guy's bald and he's got a rug on his head flopped over really weirdly. Oh, we allow that. Okay. Especially because he is white. On the day of her initial training, Jones went to discuss scheduling with the manager. Before Ms. Jones got to leave, according to court documents, the manager asked her whether she had her hair in dreadlocks. Is your hair in dreadlocks? I've been hearing all about these dreadlocks. Is that one of them dreadlock hairstyles? When Miss Jones asked what the problem was, the manager said, well, that tend to get messy, although I'm not saying yours are, but you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Catastrophe Management Solutions has a gender-neutral grooming policy, the company policy states. All personnel are expected to be dressed and groomed in a manner that projects a professional and business-like image while adhering to company and industry standards or guidelines. Hairstyles should reflect a business professional image. No excessive hairstyles or unusual colors are acceptable. So I guess what that means is that Donald Trump could not work for Catastrophe Management Solutions. Because, talk about an extreme hairstyle and a color that's just not even part of the spectrum. Jones' lawsuit claimed that the Catastrophe Management Solutions violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Oh, now that it's going to the Supreme Court, they're going to get rid of that little stumbling block now, aren't they? Jesus. Racial discrimination, according to an attorney for the company, is unlawful and deplorable because it conditions employment on a factor unrelated to the job and entirely outside of the employee's or applicant's control. In contrast, employees and applicants, regardless of race, can control their dress, makeup, and hairstyling. Hey, black lady, if you can't come to work looking more white, you have control over that now, you know. That hairstyle is a little too black for our standards here. That ain't professional. A senior U.S. District Judge, Charles Butler, and an appeals court both dismissed the case. Jones took it upon herself to appeal both of the rulings. She is now represented by lawyers from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And she stated that this case raises the important question of whether Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits workplace discrimination based on stereotypes relating to the protected category of race. Next up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Eric Bullard. Teachers around the country are taking to the streets to protest poor pay and even worse funding for their classrooms. Republicans in Colorado are looking to lock them up for it. Teacher pay in Colorado ranks 46th in the nation. And that's out of 50 states, if you don't count our protectorate states. 46th. Educators there will hold a walkout this Thursday and Friday to demand better pay, but Republican legislators are pushing a bill that would fire, fine, and potentially incarcerate any protesting teachers. The bill, sponsored by State Senator Bob Gardner and State Representative Paul Lundeen, would, quote, prohibit public school teacher strikes by authorizing school districts to seek an injunction from district court. Under the bill, teachers could face not only fines, but up to 6 months in county jail for striking. It's just a latest in a series of botched and baffling Republican responses to the grassroots movement teachers are leading. The fuse was first lit in West Virginia in February. Teachers there shut down schools for 9 days over stagnant wages and deteriorating benefits. They finally won a modest wage increase from the state Republican-controlled legislature. Teachers in Arizona who earn less today than they did in 1999 will hold a walkout on Tuesday, that's today. After deducting for the pension contribution and Social Security, the average Arizona teacher's pay is reduced to about $39,000 a year before taxes or health care benefits. In Oklahoma, teachers swarm the Capitol for days. The GOP state-run evisceration of school budgets in that state has been staggering. Last year, nearly 100 districts in the state closed schools every Friday or Monday because the districts could only afford to keep schools open 4 days a week. And the troubles have not abated. Schools began this academic year with more than 800 teacher vacancies statewide, and they're still struggling to hire people because teachers can get much better pay in any of our neighboring states, said the Oklahoma Policy Institute. Well, in Colorado, it's even clear that the Republican Party's war on education knows no bounds, because rather than just fund the schools, jail the teachers. Crunden from Think Progress finishes up here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Senate Democrats are probing the Koch brothers' influence on a number of Trump administration policies at agencies including the EPA and the Department of the Interior. The move comes after a report circulated to members of a seminar last year linked to the conservative billionaire Koch family had appeared to take credit for a number of policy decisions, including the rollback of the Clean Power Plan and efforts to scale back national monuments. Through a series of letters sent to various agencies and leaders of those agencies and the White House on Friday, 6 Democratic lawmakers took aim at the leverage wielded by the Kochs. The wealthy family has spent decades directly and indirectly funding hardline conservative policies, undermining environmental protections, and supporting think tanks that promote climate denial. Writing to Trump, the senators highlighted the prominent role the Kochs have played since the president took office. Well, he's just going to come back and say, yeah, but what about George Soros? What about all that George Soros money? Well, all I have to say is that the interest alone on that George Soros money that I haven't got for going on now, 4 decades? The interest alone would buy me not only the presidency, but also the presidency of Russia. Not just here in the United States. I would have enough money. More than enough. I might be able to buy a few other things, around the world. Long-standing members of the Koch network fill the ranks of the federal government, raising concerns about the network's access to and influence over federal decision-making. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is leading the effort, wrote, Americans have a right to know special interests are unduly influencing public policy decisions that have profound implications for public health, the environment, and the economy. Look, if you're in the process of deconstructing the administrative state so that it's small enough that you could drown it in a bathtub, and the hostile foreign power that's drowning it in the bathtub was given the keys to the bathroom to do it, would you really want to fix things? The letters are co-signed by Democratic Senators Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren, as well as Tom Udall, Ron Wyden, that's my senator, and Catherine Cortez Masto. She's from Nevada. The letters come after a report from the Koch-backed Seminar Network last December hailed victories in the first 11 months of Trump's tenure in office. Among the efforts labeled as a success was Trump's announcement that he would withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Also included were efforts to streamline infrastructure project permitting and a review of the Antiquities Act, a more than 100-year-old law protecting archaeological sites on public lands and allowing the president to protect and designate national monuments. So, in addition to Trump, letters were sent to Scott Pruitt and Ryan Zinke. Senators asked Pruitt for documents relating to the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. And let's see, what did Zinke have to do? Let me get to it. Well, here, Zinke was queried for documents pertaining to environmental policies linked to Koch influence, including ending a ban on fracking and backing a plan to reduce several national monuments. All right, well, that brings us to the part where we should go to our break, and we will. So we'll do that, and then when we come back, we'll meet up at the chef's table, go over weather from around the world, and then we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, The Sound of Silence. In the best alien invasion horror pick to come along in a while, A Quiet Place will take its place as a genre gem. As we join the Abbott family on their isolated rural farm, we quickly learn that quietude is now required for survival. Through glimpses of newspaper clippings pinned up in the Abbott's basement shop, we learn only the basics, that creatures, who we first see for ourselves only in fleeting shadow, have taken over the world and are now on their way to eliminating humanity. They're blind and hunt by sound, and before the opening credits, we see what happens when a loud sound is made by the Abbott's youngest child. Since there's little dialogue, director and co-star John Krasinski, in a role about as far from The Office as you can imagine, moves the action with a dynamic score and effects mix containing the cues for life-and-death situational awareness. With uncanny effect, he also uses the close-up on facial expressions that have to substitute for dialogue here. The always great Emily Blunt and child stars Noah Jupe and the deaf in real-life Millicent Simmonds shine at conveying every emotion with next to no words. Some films like this would aspire to greater things with a side plot. A Quiet Place actually functions as well as a family drama as it does as a horror story. Simon's character Regan blames herself for her youngest brother's fate and is a fiercely independent adolescent, and Blunt's character Evelyn, in a lesser film, would be pregnant for all the wrong reasons. Here, it's because she and her family are not just survivors, they're the symbol that humanity's not done. And Lee, whose tinkering might just lead somewhere, ends up in a situation that most parents would call their darkest speculation. You shouldn't miss A Quiet Place, but enjoy your popcorn quietly. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Add up every golf course, athletic field, industrial park, and yard in the U.S., and you have an area nearly the size of Florida. Upon first glance, all that lawn might seem a biological wasteland, a monoculture of grass. But while natural areas in the U.S. continue to decrease thanks to urbanization, urban green spaces, including lawns, could become more important reservoirs of biodiversity.
What happens if we mow our lawns less? Do we get more lawn flowers? And if we get more lawn flowers, can we get more bees?
U.S. Forest Service ecologist Susanna B. Lerman. She and her colleagues devised an experiment to see if front lawns could, in theory, provide decent habitat for bees, and if so, how to do it. So they recruited 16 homeowners from a Massachusetts suburb and monitored for flowers and bees throughout the summer for 2 years. Each of the homeowners agreed not to use any kind of pesticide or herbicide, and none had cultivated any sort of pollinator or vegetable garden that could skew the results. Some of the lawns were mowed weekly, some every other week, and others were mowed every 3 weeks.
When we mowed the lawns less, we got more flowers, so roughly 2.5 times more. But it was the yards that got mowed every 2 weeks that actually had the most bees.
No surprise, flowers were most abundant on the lawns mowed least often. But why do bees like a bit more frequent mowing? Lerman thinks it's because most of the bees she found were tiny native sweat bees, roughly the size of a grain of rice. Critters that small could find it difficult to navigate through taller grasses. In all, the researchers found 111 types of bees over the course of the study. That represents a quarter of all bee species known to occur in Massachusetts.
When you get down on your hands and knees, there's a lot going on in these lawns.
So not only do lawns hold more biodiversity than it might seem, but it turns out that one way to manage them for wildlife is to be lazy, but not too lazy.
A lot of people have been telling me that they feel vindicated now, that they have a reason to tell their neighbors why they're not mowing. It's for the bees. By mowing your lawns every 2 weeks or so, you're letting these flowers grow and bloom, and they seem to be having a positive impact for bees.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. George Mason gave an impassioned warning against slavery at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Mason concluded with a stern warning. He said, "Every master of slaves is born a petty tyrant. They bring the judgment of heaven on a country. Providence punishes national sins by national calamities. 22 years earlier, in 1773, Mason had written a longer essay in which he condemned slavery in even stronger terms. That slow poison is daily contaminating the minds and morals of our people. Every gentleman here is born a petty tyrant. Practice in acts of despotism and cruelty, we become callous to the dictates of humanity and all the finer feelings of the soul. Taught to regard a part of our own species in the most abject and contemptible degree below us, we lose that idea of dignity of man which the hand of nature has implanted in us for great and useful purposes. Mason's aversion to slavery and his vigorous condemnation of the institution remained a constant throughout his life. Even so, Mason never moved beyond condemning it in speeches and writing. Unlike George Washington, Mason never freed his slaves, nor did he make provisions to support them. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Tuesday, April 24th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Perhaps the countries most endangered by climate change are small island states. The difficulties for these countries are exacerbated because of their small geographical area, isolation, and exposure. They suffer effects such as rising sea levels, altered rain patterns, and storm surges. Because these factors can have significant effects on employment, labor unions are often at the forefront of climate change responses. To find out how small island states are coping with climate change, I talked to Toni Moore. Ms. Moore is the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union. Barbados is part of the Caribbean region of small islands. I asked Ms. Moore how her country, Barbados, and the rest of the Caribbean are confronting climate change.
Certainly, building the resilience of small and vulnerable states to deal with the effects of climate change is a priority for Barbados and our neighboring countries because it has to be a priority for our countries. Barbados and other countries in the region are very susceptible because what we have been experiencing over time is increases in the sea level, a rising sea level. Of course, we are exposed to increases in storm surge levels, and with climate change, we have also been experiencing changes in our rainfall patterns. So climate change has its importance to us, is of a high priority to us because a number of our countries depend on tourism, and those countries that aren't heavily dependent on tourism are heavily dependent on agriculture. And as you would imagine, the erosion of our coasts and the changes in the rainfall patterns and the severe weather events, all of these can combine or even individually offset our tourism product and offset our agricultural base. So we have been particularly concerned what can we do, what can be done, even if we can't do it, to make sure we can offset these rapid negative occurrences so that they don't trigger bigger problems for us.
What can labor unions, especially in small countries like Barbados, do to help meet the challenges of climate change?
As it relates to what can trade unions do, it is what a number of trade unions have been doing, and certainly our own trade union. We have been focusing on worker education, using this as part of our curriculum for workers, because each citizen has to be able to see the negative impacts as they are, because it is so easy for people to become preoccupied with the fact that the trade union should be about salary increases and should be about conditions at work. But the trade union movement has to be concerned with improving the general quality of life for people. And that speaks to an objective of our sustainability. And so we have been focusing on the issue of climate change in our programs at our Labor College. When we meet at our annual delegates conferences, speaking on these issues, speaking to these broad issues, sensitizing our workers, having their feedback so that as we prepare to make resolutions or advocacy in one form or next to our government, that we are in a position to do that.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The Prime Minister of Armenia, Serge Sargsyan, abruptly resigned on Monday, ceding power amid mass protests calling for his removal from office. Formerly Armenia's president, Sargsyan spent years gradually accumulating power and changing the country's governance structure. Richard Giragoshian directs the Regional Studies Center, an independent think tank in Armenia.
He was able to shepherd through a series of constitutional amendments that actually transformed the country from a presidential to a parliamentary form of government.
Conveniently, it was none other than Sargsyan himself who was appointed to lead that parliamentary government. Anahit Shirinyan is an Academy Associate at Chatham House, based in Armenia.
This attempt to continue the rule of the incumbents by changing constitutions is a very popular move among the incumbents in the post-Soviet space.
Sargsyan formally took over the post of prime minister last week, but was met with widespread protests started by opposition parties and joined by civic groups from around the country. Then, today, a crucial army unit defected and joined those protests. Hours later, Sargsyan announced his resignation.
This was the rare exception of a peaceful, non-violent degree of people power actually achieving its goals.
Though Sargsyan is gone, Shirinyan says the hard work of rebuilding Armenia's democratic foundation remains. Nevertheless, she thinks the example set by Armenia's recent street protests could have broader implications.
Perhaps in the future, the success of these peaceful protests might be inspiring for some other countries in the post-Soviet space who are struggling in this transition period, being stuck in between democracy and the autocracy.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes, it's not just paprika, but it's Hungarian hot paprika. More than a smidgen. Not too much now, but more than a smidgen. That's the secret. Yep. No Old Bay. Not in this chowder. Okay. A little bit of hot Hungarian paprika. Okay, well, let's begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin on the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit. We will be going to a high, maybe 85, 86, 87. Yep. And we'll have a low tonight of only 53, which is good. I like these warmer nights. I do. I like to have the window open just a tad. And it is fresh air. Air quality is considered good at 24 parts per million, but it's just going into that moderate. That's at the upper end of good. Dry conditions will continue. We are expecting about a half an inch Friday, Saturday, and part of Sunday. And my lawn's doing great. So great, I don't know whether I should fertilize it yet. I'm supposed to. I've got the winter blend still. I don't think the summer blend is taken over yet, but the place, I have to tell you, looks park-like. And I'll get photos soon so you can see. Okay, let's see. Winds are currently out of the southwest at a negligible 3 miles per hour. And will be increasing later on this morning when they shift out of the east at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tonight, they will be light and variable. Out of the east, apparently, because they're not telling me the forecast for that wind. Pressure is where we have a bit of high pressure, and it is holding at 30.01 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And humidity is 54%. Told you, drying conditions. Alrighty, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these personal purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. London is 63 and cloudy. Paris is 69 and sunny. Roma is 75 and sunny. Oh, Rome. Rome in the spring. Paris is great, too. And so is Rome. Don't drive, though. In either place. Don't. Kiev is 64 and fair. Kabul is 67 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 64 with rain and a weather advisory for flooding. Sydney, Australia is 63 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And, oh my, there's a weather advisory for New York, and what might that be? Heavy winds, small craft advisory. Those people out there that don't know how to handle the winds and you're in a small craft, just tie off in the dock. All right. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal purchased weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people live around the world. All right, starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is a synopsis of a much larger article written by Trump biographer Timothy O'Brien for Bloomberg, and Brad Reed condensed this for us for Out of Raw Story. So Timothy O'Brien, in his column for Bloomberg, outlining how Donald Trump's time in the Oval Office is playing out, much like his business career, but he warns that should not be seen as a positive. O'Brien notes that Trump has succeeded in his life largely by using hyperbole and flat-out fabrications to fool others, and is seeing him as more wealthy and powerful than he really is. However, O'Brien warns that this sort of con eventually catches up with him, as it did when he bankrupted some of his own casinos. Trump's love of the con, borrowing billions he couldn't repay so he could invest in splashy properties and projects he didn't understand, drew national attention and blanket media coverage just before the game unraveled and serial bankruptcies in the early 90s. After that debacle, Trump refashioned himself as a ubiquitous media curiosity, one who held center stage in part by being the one famous guy who could reliably be called upon to chat about sex, women, and even his own genitals. Now, that's out of O'Brien's article for Bloomberg. Now, a lot of us saw through Trump's con before he even signed on with a sharper image to sell his, it was shit. Let's be clear. Now, the gravity boots that Sharper Image sold, the one that you put on a bar in your door jamb and you hung upside down and did stomach crunches, I like those. But the Trump stuff, give me a break. And anybody who has to point the finger at themselves that much, obviously, and I know from personal experience, you're lacking in a bit of confidence about some liability that you have and you haven't reconciled. And then when you do, you may not become powerful in the way that you may, value. But you're a lot calmer in life. I know from personal experience. The trouble, however, is that Trump is no longer merely in charge of hotels and casinos. Rather, he's in charge of the most powerful military on the planet. And this, fears O'Brien, could make the unraveling of his con of American voters far more dangerous than anything that's happened in the past. That con now has global consequences, he writes. Trump doesn't fulminate about North Korea or building a wall on the Mexican border because he's a policy maven with deeply held principles. It's because he knows that toying around with sensitive and sometimes dangerous subjects gets the media's attention and keeps certain blocks of voters interested in him. Certain blocks of voters? You mean the deplorables?
Danser maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Danser maintenant et jeter vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
All right. Ian Millhiser has penned this thought piece for us here as we finish up at the chef's table. And, of course, he is out of Think Progress. Imagine for a moment a world very much like our own. In this world, Donald Trump still campaigned for office on a promise to ban foreign nationals of a particular faith from entering the country. Trump still called for a total and complete shutdown of people from this faith entering the United States until our representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. He still proclaimed that members of this faith hate us and that we cannot allow people coming into this country who have this hatred. Trump even stated openly that he would try to disguise his order banning members of this faith from entering the U.S. by having it appear to be a ban on people from certain countries where that faith predominates. The only difference between this hypothetical and our own, or this hypothetical world and our own, is that on Earth, too, Trump targeted Catholicism, a religion shared by a majority of the justices on the Supreme Court. There, Trump's Catholic ban targeted foreign nationals from Italy, Spain, and a smattering of Latin American nations, all of which are predominantly Roman Catholic. After handing down the most recent version of his Catholic ban, moreover, Trump retweeted 3 virulently anti-Catholic videos. When reporters asked the White House about these videos, Trump's deputy press secretary explained that the president has addressed these issues with a travel order that he issued earlier this year and the companion proclamation. The travel order is the analog to our universe's Muslim ban, isn't it? Does anyone think that in this alternative universe, Trump's Catholic ban would survive even the most cursory review from this Supreme Court? Well, meanwhile, here on Earth 1, Trump's Muslim ban will be heard by the Supreme Court tomorrow. By all outward signs, the plaintiffs in Trump v. Hawaii face a difficult uphill climb to find 5 justices willing to strike down this ban. A Supreme Court that appears determined to grant special rights to conservative Christians, all in the name of religious liberty, seems suspiciously unconcerned with Trump's attacks on the religious liberty of Muslims. in case you harbor any doubts about what would happen if Trump attempted to ban Catholics or some other Christian sect, consider the other major religious liberty case pending before the Supreme Court this term. Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Civil Rights Commission is a very different case. Under Colorado law, all bakers are already treated equally. They are forbidden from opening up a shop, offering to sell their goods to the general public, and then discriminating against gay customers. But Jack Phillips, the baker at the heart of Masterpiece Cake Shop, does not want to be treated the same as any other baker. He thinks that he has the right to ignore a state civil rights law that applies to his competitors, and he thinks that he enjoys this special right because of his conservative Christian beliefs. Now, Masterpiece Cake Shop is much more akin to something conservatives ordinarily find quite vulgar, affirmative action, than it is to a case seeking formal equality. It is a case alleging that the law give a particular advantage to people who hold certain beliefs. Now, to be clear, the fact that Mr. Phillips asks for such protections does not necessarily mean that his case is unjust. Affirmative action is sometimes justified either to provide a counterbalance to the lingering disadvantages caused by discrimination or to foster diversity. But that's not a typical civil rights case. In this case, seeking formal equality for people of various faiths is fundamentally a case claiming that the interests of conservative Christians should triumph over the rights of gay people to enjoy equal justice under the law. And that means everybody, because a Christian can say, I'm of a certain Christian faith and we don't serve Methodists, and we hate Catholics. Don't enter this shop if you're a Catholic. Nevertheless, in oral arguments in Masterpiece Cake Shop last December, equal justice under the law had a brutal day in the Supreme Court. There are almost certainly 4 votes in favor of Mr. Phillips' right to discriminate, and Justice Anthony Kennedy appeared likely to give Phillips a majority. Well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And we'll find out what the soothsayers that prognosticate on the court, what they will prognosticate from the hearing and oral arguments tomorrow. So we'll pick that up later on in the week. So why don't we do that? And stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day for breaking news. And we'll visit with you tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Of course we will. If really big news, like someone gets fired, like Mueller or others, do stay tuned to Netroots Radio, because we will be going live with quite an extensive panel from the blogosphere. And there's so many, we'll have to go the whole day. And we'll break it down for you, so stay tuned for that. And so stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus d'être tendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.